The cold wind bit into their skin as the first group of Cherokee stepped onto the trail, their homes behind them smoldering from the forced evacuations by soldiers. Children clutched their mothers' hands tightly, unsure why they had to leave the only world they knew. The journey had no map, no mercy, only orders. And soldiers watching from horseback as the line moved forward. The sorrow was silent, but the despair screamed through their eyes. Decades before this day, the Cherokee had embraced the ways of the white settlers, adopting written language schools, and even laws hoping assimilation would shield them from hatred, yet despite treaties and peaceful living President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830, forcing native tribes east of the Mississippi to relocate to lands west. Thousands resisted peacefully legally, but their voices were crushed by government might. In the fall of 1838, military detachments arrived at Cherokee homes, forcing families from their land without warning, allowing only what they could carry. Some were dragged from their homes. Others watched their belongings burned. Among them was a young girl named Sali. Her long, dark braid bounced behind her as she tried to keep pace with her grandmother, who coughed violently every few steps. Sali did not speak much. Not out of fear, but resolve. She had overheard soldiers say many would not survive the winter. She refused to believe that fate for her family. But the snow began early that year, and they had no shelter. They walked in lines across frozen rivers and through dense forests, their feet wrapped in cloth or bare food was rationed. Water came from frozen streams when they could stop. Many drank too quickly and became ill. The journey from Georgia to present-day Oklahoma stretched over 1,000 miles on foot and in wagons. The government called it relocation. The Cherokee called it Nunadal Tsuni, the trail. Where, they cried, and the trail lived up to that name. Each morning began with death, bodies buried in shallow graves or left by the roadside. Disease. Hunger and exhaustion stalked the travelers like wolves. The soldiers, some sympathetic, some cruel, kept the pace relentless. Sali watched as her little brother grew weaker. He had been strong at the beginning of the march, but weeks of cold and little food had dimmed his spirit one morning. She woke to find him lifeless, his face peaceful as if dreaming. Her mother wailed silently, and her father dug into the frozen ground with a spoon to bury him. They marked the grave with a single stone and kept walking. Sali did not cry. She clenched her fists and looked up at the gray sky, vowing to remember every mile, every loss. Not all Americans supported the forced removal missionaries, and some politicians spoke out fiercely against the injustice. But their words were drowned in the chorus of manifest destiny, the belief that expansion westward was a divine right. The Cherokee were in the way, and in the minds of many, removing them was justified. Sali's group was now halfway through the journey, and the deaths had doubled. Her grandmother had fallen ill and could no longer walk. A soldier offered to shoot her to spare the suffering, but Sali's father carried her instead for 2 days straight, refusing to let her die on the frozen earth. The line of travelers stretched for miles, moving like a sorrowful snake through the hills and valleys, their once vibrant community now reduced to silence and shadows. Every face told a story of betrayal, every step a heartbeat of grief. Sali's feet bled beneath the wrappings of torn cloth, but she never complained. Each day she helped her father tend to her grandmother and gave her share of food to her mother at night. She listened to the whispers of the elders as they remembered the mountains, the rivers, the sacred lands stolen from them by ink and paper, by broken promises and laws twisted to favor power. One evening, as the sun vanished behind leafless trees, a man collapsed near Sali. He was not from their group. His clothes were soaked, his hands trembling. He carried a small bag filled with maps and documents. Sali's father opened it. Cautiously inside were papers marked with army movements, land surveys, and lists of names. Sali's father realized they had stumbled upon a scout sent ahead to prepare more removals. His orders, written in cold letters, revealed that the Trail of Tears was only the beginning. The man died that night from his injuries, But the knowledge he carried lit a new fire within Sali I's father. He shared the truth with other families who until then believed the nightmare would end once they reached the new territory. Now they understood this was a campaign not of relocation, but of erasure. By the time the group reached Indian territory, months had passed, thousands had died, and those who survived were shadows of who they once were. Sali's family was among the lucky ones, though her grandmother had died 2 days before arrival, buried beside a dry creek. Her father marked the spot with 2 stones crossing each other, a quiet rebellion against the silence forced upon them. The land they were promised was dry and barren, nothing like their lush homeland. The government had lied again. Homes were not ready. Crops were not planted. Disease still lingered, and more soldiers watched from towers promising peace, but prepared for resistance. Sali looked around at the faces of the survivors. They were no longer just Cherokee. They were witnesses to a truth the world tried to forget. Years later, Sali grew into a teacher, passing down the stories, the songs, the language that others tried to erase. She wrote about the trail, not with bitterness, but with fire. She told children not just what happened, but why it must never happen again. Every name she spoke, every story she remembered, stitched the fabric of her people back together. The Trail of Tears remains one of the darkest chapters in American history, a forced migration driven by greed, cloaked in legal justification. The pain of that journey echoes through generations, but so does the resilience of those who walked it like Sali, who refused to let memory die, who turned grief into strength and silence into legacy.